Welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. I'm Dan Thomas, joined in the studio today by Craig Burley and Stevie Nicol. We also welcome to the programme Frank Leboeuf with us, as is a very happy Pablo Zabaleta, as Manchester City thrashed Arsenal by 4-1 at the Etihad to close the gap to 2 points at the top of the Premier League table and making Pep Guardiola's side now the big favourites to once again win the Premier League. It was a game we've been looking forward to for a long time. It was a game in which Manchester City completely dominated.
Yeah, I mean, this could have been... Well, when you think about the other chances that City had, first and second half, it could have been 6 or 7. I mean, it could have been. They completely took them apart. I mean, if Arsenal had gone to the Etihad at a time when they still had their mojo, I think it would have been a contest. But they've lost theirs, and City got their mojo back weeks ago, and they've been like a steam train just going forward. And we've talked about it. All the best players playing really well at the key business end of the season. We saw that again today. Rodri, Stones, Gundogan, Haaland, although he missed chances, and particularly Kevin De Bruyne, who had a kind of heavy-legged part of the season around the World Cup before and after. But this, unfortunately, wasn't a contest today. It just wasn't. City was so good. To clip a few more balls earlier, not up high, just clipped over the top with nice pace on it into Erling Haaland. He can take it on his chest or his feet. And then De Bruyne works from a wider position in behind the Arsenal midfield, particularly Partey, which he did. And then he worked off as a pair off Erling Haaland, and it worked beautifully for them. But Arsenal just didn't deal with that. So they'd obviously configured a plan before the game of if it was going this certain way, the game, they were going to play this way. And of course, it's more difficult to do that if you A, have a false 9 and B, have Julian Alvarez up front. But when you have Erling Haaland up front, who you can clip it up to, and he can be physical and hold it up, then De Bruyne can go and work from him. So, yeah, I just thought it was a bit of a masterclass from the manager. You know, he takes all the kudos for it, but the players performed on the field as well.
Frank, De Bruyne and Haaland, as Craig's saying, playing with this attacking nous that Arsenal just didn't seem to be able to deal with. How do you try and defend two players who are playing in those positions and in that sort of form?
Well, you have to make sure that you cover each other. Holding was most of the time with Haaland. Maybe too close, certainly too close to him. It's what happened in the first goal when Haaland went around him, and that's the first mistake. And after, you have to make sure that the three at the back is gonna cover you and cover the spaces behind you. That's what Gabriel especially should have done in the first goal. Even if you have to recognize the talent is there, that De Bruyne is so clever, he knows exactly where he has, whether to put the ball or to run to get the ball from Haaland. So it's, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but definitely if you stick to Haaland and you allow him to use your body to turn around, that's the first mistake you shouldn't do. That's the basic mistake you shouldn't do. You should avoid to do that. But you have to recognize that those players are absolutely fantastic. And it's why I was a little bit bored during the game where obviously, and it was too obvious, Manchester City was too strong comparing to Arsenal, who I think some players didn't play their game and were kind of lost during the game.
Pablo, how much did you enjoy watching this performance from Manchester City?
Dan, to be honest, I just sat in the sofa for 90 minutes, 95 minutes, and I really enjoyed that. What a game, what a team performance that was. And from all the players, I mean, individually, they all performing at their best, collectively as a team, they all flying, incredible. It was a pure joy to watch Man City tonight. Incredible performance. And that's great to see at this stage of the season because they playing for the triple. And when you see the team performing at that level, of course, we all have a dream that we can see Man City winning all the trophies this season. But of course, it was a fantastic performance from all of them. So congratulations to the players, to Pep, because every time we see something different. We know that they have Haaland now, and how they play. Sometimes they go long, they play more direct. Haaland coming deep. set the ball for midfielder or Kevin De Bruyne to run through midfield or defenders. They always find a way that they always make the difference. So that is a proper team.
Let's put it in context. Manchester City squad is such that he could leave out the man of the match from an FA Cup semi-final, Riyad Mahrez, that scored the hat-trick. That's where they are. That's how good Bernardo Silva has played. That's how good Jack Grealish has been. That they can effectively take it. OK, it was against the Championship side, but it was still a Wembley semi-final. It was still a hat-trick. And this is the biggest game domestically of the season so far for Man City, and he leaves them out. I think that tells you where they are as a side. And look, if Arsenal go on to finish second or whatever it is, and that looks likely, this isn't the game that's they're going to look back and say, this cost us, because this could always happen against City. It's the consequences of what's happened in the previous 3 games, particularly the last 2, or particularly the last 1 against Southampton, that has put them in this position where they were on the back foot mentally and physically going into this game. They were lacking confidence, going into this tie. They knew it was probably drinking in the last chance saloon. Whereas 3 weeks ago, it looked like they could go up to this game here, take a drop and walk away and still be in pole position by quite some way. So, I mean, the wheels have come off a lot quicker than I thought they were going to be. They've got over a few hurdles this season, but the last 3 games before this have really surprised me how it's fallen apart at the seams for this Arsenal side, because I didn't really see that coming, I have to be honest, because they've been super all season. But I don't know if it's pressure, tiredness, lack of rotation. I don't know what it is. But one side looks super fresh and on the front foot, and Arsenal now, since that Liverpool second half, have been on the back foot with the fixed bayonet up.
Frank used the word boring. It was a non-contest, really, in the second half. I went to go and get a sandwich. it was one of those games
the last 20 minutes
it was inevitable. You knew exactly. Are you surprised how easy this was for City in the end?
No, because I think we have to realise that Man City at the best, which they are right now, even against an Arsenal side, had they been at their best, Man City, you back Man City all day long. And Man City really are, for anybody. And if I'm Newcastle, I'm looking at Man City. If I'm the owners of Newcastle and I have all this wealth and all this money, I'm looking at Man City as the model that I want to follow. Because in terms of where they are and their development, these two clubs there's a huge divide, not just on the field, but in how they run the club. Man City over the last few years, just every year go and add a player that costs 100 million. To be able to do that and to be able to add a player like Haaland to an already great side is why they are so good. So if I'm Arsenal, I'm disappointed, but I need to look at it and say, right, how do we get closer to this team? And that's how you go about it.
If it was Arsenal, Pablo, that had won, 5 out of the last 6 Premier League titles and Manchester City looking for their first title, do you think we would have seen a different game today? How much did the psychology of City, having been there and done that in the past, compared to this young, inexperienced Arsenal side, how much did that play a part, if any, today?
Well, of course, when you have players in the squad, when the team that they've been in this situation before, and they can, hold the pressure, and I know that makes a difference for the team, of course. Man City Football Club is a club that they've been in this situation and they've been dominating the English football for the last 10 years. It was tough at the beginning. I remember quite well that it was Manchester United, it was Chelsea, Liverpool. It was quite hard to compete against them. In those situations, they've always been better than us. And in that moment, but then after 10 or 12 years' time, you could really see that now Manchester City players, they get used to it in those situations where they can really compete and they don't feel the pressure. Something that probably you could see in some of the Arsenal players, because it's a quite young squad. Some of the players, they've not been in this situation before. They're playing well. They're a good team, but it's in those moments, in those games where you have to go and put in a good performance. You have to do almost a perfect game to beat like a team like Manchester City, and I think Arsenal was absolutely hammered today. So they gave no chance, and that is the big difference when you really see and when you really compare it both teams.
You must have had it at Liverpool, Stevie. Just this belief that obviously you can't teach, but something you just garnered over the years.
Well, what happens is you, without knowing it, you become a sponge. You get brought into a situation and a culture that begins to soak into you. And before you know it, you're part of it and you're doing the same things and winning games. And for Manchester City, every single game for them is the same because they're expected to win. And so, as I said, that culture and that experience means that regardless of how big or how small supposedly we see a game, every game for them is the same. So when it comes to a big game, there's no extra nerves, there's no extra nothing. It's just another game that they have to produce.
That comes from the manager.
Absolutely.
And we talk about all the silky football that they've played and they do and all these great players. You tell me, and this is how difficult it is for other teams, you tell me another team in club football that works harder and to win the ball back than Man City. Kevin De Bruyne doesn't slack. Bernardo Silva doesn't slack. Erling Haaland, Rodri, Gundogan, all these players that have been there, seen it and done it, they don't sit back and admire and allow other teams possession. They go in bunches and just... Even Arsenal, who have been very good at passing the ball this year, couldn't get the ball, couldn't retain the ball, couldn't get it to Saka, couldn't get it to Martinelli, couldn't get it into Odegaard, and it hardly ever saw the feet of Gabriel Jesus for long times. And that's not just because Arsenal are not quite as sharp in their passing. It's because City make it so difficult because these big-time players, they have the mentality, Dan, that they work as hard as everybody else. The manager doesn't take 70%, 80% bench. Anybody who's slacking and not closing down, I've got somebody else that will come on.
And we saw that with De Bruyne, obviously, early in the season,
Yeah.
made reference.
Yeah, and I don't think it wasn't the fact that he wasn't working hard. He just looked under fire. He looked a little bit heavy-legged. He looked like he needed a little rest or, just freshen up a little bit.
But that's how demanding he is. What other manager is going to not play Kevin De Bruyne unless he's injured? I don't think there is one. And when I say demanding, I think you saw the difference today. When Man City were closing the ball down, Man City were closing the ball down to win the ball. But when you looked at Arsenal, and we've seen all the TV programmes and all the things about the coaching that Arteta's doing, and again, it goes back to where these two teams are in their development. Arsenal were in good positions closing the ball down, but they were a yard further off. They were in good spots, but that extra little bit that Pep demands, and the players themselves demand from each other, one was standing in front of the ball and the other one was going to win the ball.
Everything Arsenal did today, with and without the ball, was hesitant.
Right.
It was kind of hesitant, worried about giving a pass away, worried about committing to a press because of what was going to happen behind, and it was just a very hesitant and I think lacking belief performance. I don't think they believe today, and I think for most of the season they have believed that they are as good, that they can beat City and they can go and win the league. I think certainly today, off the back of recent results, they look like a team that kind of knew if City played well, they would win.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, I want to go back to Pep Guardiola effects on the players and the fact that what Stevie explained about being a sponge and getting the process of getting the experience and being in that process, you learn and you learn very quickly. But because of Guardiola, you have a very fast process. And what they did, unlike Chelsea, is bringing one player per season, maybe paying him 100 million. And I want to take the example of Grealish, where that guy had such a hard season last season, but got the experience. Because don't forget, he just comes from Aston Villa. He didn't get that experience. Now he's an international player, and now you don't see the difference. He's one of the leaders. He knows exactly what to do. He had that experience because of a coach, because of teammates that he has. And this process has come very, very fast for him because of the environment. That's not what's going on for Arsenal, where they are very young players, and many of them. And it's what happens with Chelsea, where you bring young players, you pay them a lot, but they don't get into that process with the environment of already experienced players and big coach like Guardiola is. That's the difference, I think, between Manchester City, Arsenal, and of course Chelsea.
Pablo, what impresses you most about Guardiola?
Well, I only spent one season with Pep when he first came to Manchester, and he's a genius. I mean, he's a great coach, about tactics, but especially in the way he managed all the players off the field as well. And he creates always that, how I can say, that healthy competition between players, because he knows that you've got a big squad. The squad depth of Man City is incredible. But you have to perform. If you want to keep a place in the starting 11, you have to perform week in, week out. You have to give 7, 8 out of 10 almost in every game, because you have someone else. And it doesn't matter who you are for Pep. And he have to bring someone who is 17 years old or 18 years old. It doesn't matter. If Pep believes that he's good enough to play and he can do what he expects, he does it. He doesn't have a clue on who you are. And the players can really see that. And that's why he's so good at this. It's not only about tactics and in the way they play out from the back and all this and playing, he always set up the team to attack. That's brilliant. We all really enjoy watching all the team from Pep Guardiola. But also we have to say in the way he always managed all the players and the team, and how he demands 100% from the players, and he creates the right mentality between all of them to compete, to go again. And that is what makes the difference for Manchester City at the moment.
He improves players, doesn't he? Yeah. And if he doesn't think he can improve you, he'll sell you. I mean,
look at what Sterling's gone. Obviously, Cancelo went as well, Jesus, and it all seems to have made sense looking at what they've done this season. Obviously, Jesus has been good for Arsenal, but City haven't missed him.
No. Well, you're not going to miss him when you bring Erling Haaland in.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think he saw that Raheem Sterling was, still a good player, but was going to be surplus to requirements on a regular basis. And to be fair, I think Sterling realised that as well. So they got good money for him, great money for him, if memory serves me right. And he's not playing exactly well at Chelsea, and they've got Foden, Silva, Mahrez, Grealish, young Cole Palmer can all come in and fill these positions and have done. So yeah, I mean, looking at the way they're playing in every competition this season, both domestically and in Europe, the only thing that I can see that will beat Man City is Manchester City. I don't see any other team in Europe.
No.
Champions League, I don't see any team now between now and the end of the season beating this side unless Man City make mistakes. Simple as that.
What will Arteta be most disappointed with his side as he's reflecting on this game tonight?
I think he'll be disappointed that there was such a wide gap between both sides. And it might...
Could he have done something?
Nothing, absolutely not.
Really,
we were talking...
We give him a pass for this?
Yes. Craig and I were talking during the game. We were like, at half-time, right, what do you do? What can you do?
Right.
So, what do you do and what can you do? And the answer to both questions was nothing. He was sat on the side talking to his assistant, and we're trying to figure out, what could they be talking about? Because can they change the way they play? Well, they can't change the way they play because the way they play has gotten them to where they are. And you can't just all of a sudden rip it up in the middle of a game against a team like City. So you can't do that. So do you make personal changes? Well, they didn't have any personnel changes to make. Yes, he brought Trossard on. Could he have brought Trossard on at half-time? Yeah, would it have made any difference? No. I mean, so you're looking down your bench and there's nothing you can do to make yourself any better. So, disappointed in that they're not as good as he probably thinks they are. But I think in a cold light of day, he'll go, right, have got us to where we are. So now I need to go back and I need to sit down with the sporting director and everybody else, and we need to have a conversation about how we move this team on from where it is now. Because they have to go and do what City have done, starting 8 or 9 years ago. And they have to sign 2 or 3 more players who absolutely get straight in that first 11. And then you have that competition for places that Pablo's talking about, where you've got real players sitting on the bench. Not, and no disrespect, not playing a holding for 5 and 6 games who's not good enough to make you Premier League champions. So that's what Arsenal have to do. So, yes, be disappointed, but don't... Just look at the big picture.
Do you agree, Frank? Arteta gets a pass for today?
Stevie, I'm sorry. Stevie, I'm sorry, but don't you think that nowadays teams don't have any plan B? I know the Liverpool that you play for, and those teams I used to watch, and I saw Marseille as well in the 90s. They were able to have a plan B. They were able to only defend and not concede any goal. And in another game, give a big pressure on the other team and be able to play differently. I feel that, and it's not about only Arsenal. It's all about, I don't think City knows how to play differently. I don't think Bayern Munich knows how to play differently. It seems to be that nowadays, a team has a certain way to play and stick to it, are very good at it, but don't have any other possibility if they are in danger. Arsenal was the example today, but they're not the only one. And that's, I think it's a question mark right now. Why they cannot be able to only defend and try to park the bus and not concede any goal because you play against Manchester City.
I think that is one of the things that when they went 1-0 up and it was clear that they were clipping the ball into Haaland and De Bruyne was getting the space, and that their pressing game was, as Stevie said, kind of half-hearted, was, and it's hindsight, but just to say, listen, OK, this team are up for it today. They're carving us open. Here's what they're doing, and De Bruyne is getting space. Let's get Martinelli back in. Let's get Saka back in. Let's just drop a little bit deeper. Let's drop Xhaka and Partey in front of Holding and Gabriel, and just as Frank said, just not quite park the bus, but just sort of deny that space and allow Diaz and Akanji and John Stones and Kyle Walker possession. And if they break you down with a great pass, they break you down with a great pass. But Arsenal continued to do what they were doing from the first 5 or 10 minutes, and De Bruyne continued to do what he was doing for pretty much all of the game. So when he's creating that much, when he's getting that much space, you've got to you somehow got to say to somebody, let's have 10, 15 minutes here and make it difficult for them, and we might hit them on the counter.
So why didn't he do that?
Is that him?
He just kept plugging away.
Is that a point towards the inexperience of Arteta? Okay. Because at the end of the day, this is your first job.
Right.
So does that say something about Arteta that he doesn't? Is he not doing that because football snobbery? Well, I don't do that. We can't do that. We can't park the bus. We didn't do that under Pep. I learned a lot of things under Pep, but then he must have learned a lot of things for Davy Moyes. Right. So why didn't he go to the Davy Moyes part of it and say, right, when things are not going well, we sort of get a little bit deeper and a little bit tighter? Is that to do with Arteta being stubborn and snobbish a little bit and not wanting to do that?
How difficult is it to defend him? Obviously, Craig mentioned, he could have got a hat-trick today without any sort of problem. He didn't have the greatest day in front of goal, but the hold-up play and just the nuisance that he causes to the centre-backs.
Yeah, of course. It's so difficult to defend against this player. If you're a defender, you want to, or your team or your back four want to defend high up the pitch, he will make the run in behind. He's so quick and powerful, so hard to defend. If you want to defend deep inside of the 18-yard box, his movement inside the box, incredible. He's really strong in the air. I mean, you want to go shoulder to shoulder, no chance. I mean, it's quite hard to defend against that player. That's why he's making team really difficult for defenders. Again, Haaland, his first season in the Premier League, And, you know, at the beginning, everyone was saying, because that happened with all the players when they come from abroad, you know, Germany, Spain, we want to see him in the Premier League, you know, one of the toughest league and all that. But he's killing, you know, absolutely everyone. He's smashing all the teams. And it seems like if he was more clinical today, he could have scored 3 or 4 goals. And he's exactly like that in every single game. And don't forget that Pep took him off after 60 minutes in some of the games to give him a rest. Imagine if he played 90 minutes every single game. He would have 60 goals by now. But what a player, what a signing. And I always say the thing, I hope he can continue playing that way. He's only 22. You know, first season at Man City, doing really well. Hopefully he's, you know, be humble, continue with that ambitions to continue growing as a player, as a person. And hopefully he can, you know, bring a lot of success to Manchester City and hopefully stay for so many years. I don't want to see any talking about moving to Real Madrid or all that.
Sheffield United dealt better with him
Right.
at the weekend than Arsenal. And maybe that was because Arsenal were a bit more open. But he never really got any change from it was a back three. Gabriel and Haaland just couldn't deal with him. And when you've got a guy that size, even if you're a big centre-back, what's the point trying to have a fight?
Sure.
What's the point trying to get too tight when he can spin you? You've got
Exactly.
You've got to just play. You've got to play a bit cuter, and Arsenal just didn't. And I suppose the difficulty is when you've got De Bruyne moving around behind as well. It is kind of off-putting as a centre half, or whether you step in or whether you don't. But those two in particular were just such a handful today.
Yes.
And Arsenal left themselves open to that by the way that they played.
Frank, defensively, the thing for Haaland that you notice is just constant, all the time, annoying you, basically.
He is, and that's the thing. You have to be very strong physically. You have to be reactive. You have to anticipate most of the time. But you can read this game in a way that it can be a little bit slow the first 4 yards, I would say. Now, after when he's launched, it's over. It's over because it's so powerful you can't deal with him. It's why I was talking about not maybe sticking too much to him because you lost the fight, that's for sure. If you try to fight with him, you're going to lose it. But if you try to be a little bit smart, be in a shadow of him, you know, and try to get maybe the 2 yards that you need when he turns to get with him, then you get that space that you need and maybe that anticipation needed to get the ball before him. And definitely, you have to have your friends. You have to have your teammates working with you. It's why you have to delay with the 2 yards, all his runs, all his ball when he gets the balls, in fact, to wait for your teammates to go and surround him. That's the only way you can deal with him. Otherwise, like it was today, sticking to him, Gabriel not covering it, not being helped by the guy on the side, it's impossible. Too much spaces for him. It's heaven. As Craig said, against Sheffield United, he didn't have any spaces. So he couldn't do what he wanted to do.
There's a little problem though. Everything Frank said is spot on, you know. But if you think about it, yes, you need your mate that plays beside you to cover you. But when you're playing against Manchester City, unfortunately, you've got Bernardo Silva, you've got Gundogan coming through the middle, you've got De Bruyne running at you with the ball, you've got Jack Grealish coming from the inside. So this whole time you need two players to take care of Haaland. Who's going to cover everybody else? That's the problem.
Right.
If you want to take care of him, say, right, today we're taking care of this guy. Unfortunately, they've got 5 or 6 others who take advantage of all the space that's created because he's causing havoc and he's not even got the ball at his feet.
Which is why you need to drop a bit deeper if you're going to give yourself a chance. And when that long blonde hair fell down,
Stevie got really angry.
He got very angry again.
Do you know what?
It's the moment of the day. He's getting angry about
Why are you
something.
getting angry at his hair?
I was like, you know what, bring him a horse on so we can see him with his horse and his hair will be flying. And he'd be like that.
Why does hair make him so angry?
I don't, it just annoyed me. Yeah, but you know what annoyed me, actually? He kept touching it. He kept giving all this every 2 minutes.
Well, then he scores a goal.
Every time the ball went out of play, he was, I need to get it all right. I think
you're concentrating in the wrong area.
Well, the game was over. It was the only thing to think about.
That was it.
He went, look at his hair.
And he's touching it again. It's like, all right, Stephen, calm down. Overall, though, the reason we have focused so much on this game, because it is a significant contributor as to who will win the Premier League. Manchester City were favourites going into it. They are even bigger favourites now, 14 to 1 on. That means you have to put on $14 to win one. Arsenal 8 to 1. City with 2 games in hand. Destiny, of course, now very much there. So let's just take a look at the remaining fixtures. And for City, Fulham, West Ham, Leeds, Everton, Chelsea, Brighton, you could really put any team there at the moment, considering how well they're playing. For Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, Brighton, Forest and Wolves. Frank, is it over?
For me, it's over, unless, Manchester City is again makes mistakes in Champions League and doesn't go through, because maybe the positive effect of winning all games might be stopped at some point because of Real Madrid, because they made a mistake. That's the only way that I can see Manchester City maybe being stuck at some point. Otherwise, all the team that we see, no team can deal with. Well, as Craig said before, nobody can deal right now with Manchester City. And only Manchester City can lose the title. Like only Manchester City can lose the Champions League and the FA Cup, I think. So, for me it's over, because on top of it, Arsenal, they're going to lose it. They're going to lose in their mind.
When Arsenal lost to Everton, and it was a surprise, they picked themselves up with one of the best gritty second-half performances at Aston Villa.
Yes.
And kicked on. And they really showed some steel. But I don't think they're coming back from this last 4 games. 2-0 up at Liverpool, 2-0 up in whoever was it they played after Liverpool.
West Ham.
Losing 3-1 at one point to the team at the bottom of the league at home. Southampton. Thank you, Frank. And
you're welcome.
And getting a basting at the Etihad. I just think this one has just completely going to take the wind out of the sail. The last 3 or 4 games. And I just don't see how A, they bounce back from that now, and B, how City are going to falter, as Frank said. So yeah, it's going to be going to the blue half of Manchester again, I think.
How many other trophies will they win as well? Of course, favourites to do the treble. As Frank mentioned, they've got Real Madrid over 2 legs in the Champions League. And also there's a little matter of the FA Cup final. They're 4 to 1 on to win that against United at Wembley. Of course, a game that is live on ESPN+. Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.